Even though his bright musical legacy spanned a decade, it wasn't nearly enough time to do everything he wanted to do. Since he looked at music in totality, his goal was to exemplify each style of as many periods as he could possibly do, from the lowest blues to the highest symphony. However, a carefully guarded secret he held would not only cripple his career and his relationships, it would ultimately cost him his life. American soul singer Donny Edward Hathaway was born on October 1st, 1945 in Chicago, Illinois. Since the Second World War was over, soldiers were returning home. Donny's father, a former serviceman, was either unwilling or unable to raise him, so his mother moved with her newborn to her family home in St. Louis, Missouri. His maternal grandmother, who raised him, was a respected gospel singer and ensured that Donny be raised in the church. She was also the one to introduce him to music. He began singing in the church choir at the age of 3 and studying piano. Donny showed such a tremendous gift for music that they started taking him on tour to perform at other churches. He developed quite the reputation for himself, becoming known as Little Donny Pitts, the nation's youngest gospel singer. His mother told Ebony magazine in their April 1979 issue, he loved music. One of his idols was Liberace. Whenever Liberace came on television, Donny would be there in front of the set. Sometimes he would get up late at night saying he heard music in his head. He would go to the piano and play so intensely that perspiration would come streaming down his face. He honed his piano skills in high school, parlaying them into a fine arts scholarship to study music at Howard University. There he would meet his roommate and drummer, Rick Powell, who ultimately launched Donny's musical career as the piano player and lead vocalist of his band, the Rick Powell Trio. By Donny's junior year, he'd taken Washington by storm, playing at all the popular nightclub venues. Now, the star of the Rick Powell Trio was Donny Hathaway. In 1967, Donny married Eulalia Van. The couple met while attending Howard, where both were studying music. Not long after, they had their first child, a daughter named after her mother, who they affectionately called Layla. Since Donny had a family to support and his gig with the trio was only part-time, he needed to make some more money. Enter Curtis Mayfield. He'd heard about Donny's talents and offered him the opportunity to come to Chicago and work with Curtis's label, Curtom Records. Donny agreed, dropped out of Howard, and packed his bags. Donny worked as a songwriter, session musician, and producer for Curtom. He took part in projects by the Staple Singers, Aretha Franklin, and Curtis Mayfield himself. As always, wherever Donny went, people took notice of his work. Eventually, a couple of songs he wrote, Our Ages or Our Hearts, and Tryin' Times, got enough attention to end up on a major label, thanks to another singer and musician named Roberta Flack, when they were included on her 1969 debut album titled First Take. Donny recorded his first single under his own name in 1969, a duet with singer June Conquest called I Thank You Baby. That same year, he signed to Atco Records, then a division of Atlantic Records, after being spotted by saxophonist King Curtis, who introduced him to one of the great music business pioneers of the 20th century and co-head of Atlantic Records, Jerry Wexler. His very next single would become his first hit, The Ghetto Part 1, which he co-wrote with another former Howard student, Leroy Hudson, appeared the following year on his critically acclaimed debut album, Everything is Everything.
Yes, this is the ghetto, y'all. Showing up now.
The early 70s was a magical period for Donny. He returned to the studio in the fall of 1970 to record a single that would become a perennial hit and ensure his legacy for generations, called This Christmas.
This Christmas.
His self-titled second effort was released in the spring of 1971. The majority of songs are covers of pop, gospel, and soul songs that were released around the same time. It was received well and made a particularly strong showing on the R&B charts, largely due to the Leon Russell hit, A Song for You. That summer, Donny and Eulalia celebrated the birth of their second daughter, Kenya. In early 1972, he released Live, a live album recorded at 2 concerts held the year prior. It features some traditional soul anthems, such as Marvin Gaye's 1971 hit, What's Going On, but also Carole King's pop standard, You've Got a Friend. Also that year, he joined forces with Roberta Flack to record a series of duets. The result would be his third album, titled Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway. The album was a critical and commercial success, hitting number 3 on the pop chart and number 2 on the R&B chart. It generated 3 hit singles, including Where Is the Love, which captured the number 5 position on the pop chart, shot all the way to number 1 on the R&B chart, and won him his first and only Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Performance by a duo, group, or chorus. More opportunities for Donny continued to pour in, from arranging to producing to scoring films. Fun fact, Donny also recorded the theme song to the TV series Maude. But with his success peaking, people close to him began to notice something was unusual in his behavior. His wife took matters into her own hands and sought professional help to find out if anything serious was going on with him. Something serious was indeed going on. Donny was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic, a brain disease that can trigger delusions and hallucinations. Typical symptoms are feelings of persecution, hearing voices, confusion, anger, and anxiety. To make matters worse, treatments in the 70s were primitive at best. At one point, he was prescribed 14 different medications that he was to take twice a day. After Donny was diagnosed and began taking medication, his mental state improved. However, the better he felt, the less diligent about following his prescription regimen he became, and often stopped taking his medications altogether. No matter how many successes Donny was accumulating, his diagnosis would continue to cast a shadow over his blossoming career. Even though very few people knew what was going on, as his symptoms worsened, his problems became harder to ignore. Since paranoid schizophrenics may go through periods of normalcy with few symptoms, followed by periods where the symptoms are acute, he was functional enough to get back to work and release more music. His final studio album, Extension of a Man, came out in 1973. While it stalled on the pop charts, it still cranked out the top 20 R&B hit, Love, 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 as well as his classic ballad, Someday We'll All Be Free. Sometime after the album's release, Donny simply dropped out of sight. For the next several years, his mental instability wreaked havoc on his life and career and required several hospitalizations. His musical output ceased, he lost touch with his friends, and he split with Eulela. He would go on to have a third child, named Donita, with another woman. Eventually, Donny did return to the charts in 1978 after again teaming up with Roberta Flack for a duet called The Closer I Get to You for her 1977 album, Blue Lights in the Basement. The song exploded on the charts, topping the R&B and reached the number 2 spot on the Hot 100. It was also nominated for a Grammy Award. Now, back in the spotlight, Donny immediately returned to studio to record an entire record of duets with Roberta. In January of 1979, he flew out to New York City to lay down vocals for the new songs. While the vocals were solid, his mental state was more fragile than anyone knew. During one particular recording session with producers and musicians, Eric Mercury and James Mtume, Donny had a major freakout moment. According to James, Donny was singing perfectly, as he normally did, but at one point screamed and ran out of the room, huddling in a corner. He explained to James that white people were trying to kill him and had his brain hooked up to a machine to steal his music and his sound. At that moment, Eric decided to call it a day and everyone left the studio. On Saturday, January 13th, after a day of recording with Roberta Flack, Donny, along with his business associate, Ed Howard, and Atlanta attorney David M. Franklin, had dinner at Roberta's home. She recalled Donny's behavior in Ebony's April 1979 issue. He was excited about the Grammy nomination. We both were. And after dinner, I dropped him and Ed Howard off at the Essex House. Donny asked me if I had any more of the cake left that we had at dinner. My housekeeper, who's from Jamaica, had made it. I said no, but I told him I'd have some more for him by Tuesday. He said, okay. Then he said goodnight, and I said goodnight. Since Sunday was our off day, I said, I'll see you, and that was the last time I saw him alive. Shortly after 11 o'clock, the Midtown North Police Station received a call about a man who had fallen or jumped from a 15th floor window at the Essex House, a luxury hotel on Central Park South. The man was Donny Hathaway. Police would ultimately rule his death as a suicide. He was 33 years old. No notes were found in his suite, which was double locked from the inside. His suitcases, music tapes, recorder, and sheet music were all intact. Everything was normal, except that his bedroom window was open on that cold, rainy winter night, and the safety glass had been removed and placed on the bed. Over the years, various rumors have circulated that he fell or even that he was pushed from the window. In Chicago, where he lived on the 17th floor on the LaSalle Towers apartments, friends say Donny often, quote, had a message to preach, end quote, and would lean out of a window and preach to the winds, accepting free-flying birds as his, quote, audience, end quote. Others say that the idea of taking his own life was not beyond Donny's capabilities. They reported that he talked about taking his own life, read books on the subject, and once tried to complete the task by taking pills. The sad truth, however, is that a great number of those who suffer from paranoid schizophrenia end up taking their own lives. 1 week after Donny's untimely death, his family and friends gathered in St. Louis to pay their respects. Reverend Jesse Jackson eulogized him at his funeral service, saying, "How Donny died is not as important as how he lived. He lived the life of the genius that he was." In 2019, Donny Hathaway was posthumously awarded the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award, presented to performers who, during their lifetime, have made creative contributions of outstanding artistic significance to the field of recording.